Timber's being ridiculous.
Sorry, guys.
We just stopped out of nowhere.
Timber's,
I think he's chasing a bug around.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bug. I think it's a earpiece, actually, to my headphones.
Oh, a piece of rubber.
Piece of rubber. He's like kicking it around, and now he's chewing on it. So I want to get it away from him. It's not food.
Nablis is eating Seth's earbuds.
He's gnawing on it. He's chewing it like gum, like it's a ball. Except a very, very tiny, tiny little ball that he's playing with. Oh, he's looking at me with the most guilty. He's still got it in his mouth, in the corner of his mouth, and he's giving me like the most guilty look in the world and not moving.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Oh, I think Rand's a bit of a hatter right now. Maybe not a mad hatter, but he's definitely a hatter.
He's on his way.
He's on his way. In particular, that the scene that I really think marks his insanity, sort of that he's come a fairly long way along the journey of insanity, is when he kills the caravan.
Yeah, I think of that as the moment when it's like, okay, this is, yeah.
And from then on, I really do think that Rand is in a constant battle to keep his sanity.
Yeah.
And also the amount of time that's passed, the amount of channeling he's done when he's not in control, the amount of times he's like dipped into...
Through the taint,
yeah. It's like, ugh, it's all over him.
It happens after he leaves this camp.
On his way to Tyr.
Yeah.
It's one of the few scenes we get with Rand in this book. We get a little bit at the beginning, one or two scenes as he's traveling, and then the end in the stone. But there's very little of him going on. So we see him here a little in the beginning, sort of losing control, him killing
the woman,
and then him with Kalendor, which drives him insane in and of its own right.
Yeah.
Because it's got that problem with the buffer.
I'll read us in. Chapter 2, Saidin, and her symbol is the dragon fang. Face expressionless, the Tuathan woman stared at the banner as it drooped again, then turned her attention to those around the fire, especially the one reading, the one half again as tall as Perrin and twice as big. You have an Ogier with you. I would not have thought... She shook her head. Where is Moraine Sedai? It seemed the dragon banner might as well not exist as far as she was concerned. Perrin gestured toward the rough wood hut that stood furthest up the slope, at the far end of the bowl. With walls and sloping roof of unpeeled logs, it was the largest, though not very big at that. Perhaps just barely enough to be called a cabin rather than a hut. That one is hers and Lan's. He is her warder. All the women who came insisted on speaking with Moraine immediately, and alone.
So the title in the header, Saidin and the Dragon Fang, just symbolizes Rand's struggle with controlling Saidin and the One Power?
I think so. Okay. What happens at the end of the chapter?
The shaking and the earthquake.
He doesn't know what he's doing, and he embraces Saidin.
And so Saidin embraces him.
Yeah.
So it's just a couple little details here that show this is a temporary camp. The logs of the hut are like uncut.
Yeah.
There's just almost a camp, but not quite. Moraine gets a log cabin. Everybody else gets tents.
Perrin says fodder is scarce, but he'll take care of her horse as well as he can. Just kind of demonstrating how they lack resources. I noted kind of toward the end of this page, more and more he wanted meat above anything else.
That's just Perrin becoming a little more wolf-like in his attitudes and his preferences.
Yeah.
Whether he wants to or not.
The woman in men's clothes was peering toward Leia, who was just disappearing into Moraine's hut. What do you see, Min? He asked. She came to stand beside him, her dark eyes troubled. He did not understand why she insisted on breeches instead of skirts. Perhaps it was because he knew her, but he could not see how anyone could look at her and see a too handsome youth instead of a pretty young woman.
She's a cutie.
She's my favorite of the girls.
We've been into Mistborn lately, and I can't help but see her and Vin as being very similar looking.
They look the same.
Short, dark hair, small women. They wear pants.
Team Min, Team Vin. The Tinker Woman is going to die, she said softly, eyeing the others near the fires. None was close enough to hear.
So that's her, she has a seeing of the mask.
Yeah, of her face.
And we get a bit of misdirection there, because the woman actually gets, cut on her forehead in one chapter and gets blood on her face.
When the Trollocs attack?
No, when Rand does his earthquake thing. She actually gets cut on her face and gets blood streaming down her face.
Oh.
And then Moraine heals her, and it's a bit of misdirection where you're like, wait, is Min wrong?
Perrin asks Min if she's sure about Leia. Is that her name? I wish I didn't know. It makes it worse, knowing and not being able to. Perrin, I saw her face floating above her shoulder, covered in blood, eyes staring. It's never any clearer than that. She shivered and rubbed her hands together briskly. Light, but I wish I saw more happy things. All the happy things seem to have gone away.
And I guess the value in Min's foretelling really is not in seeing that somebody's going to die, but in understanding that, yes, you're probably going to get attacked.
Yeah.
And that's something that people overlook over and over and over again. Like when she's in the White Tower and she's pointing out all the Aes Sedai that are going to get killed. It's like, you might not be able to stop that, but you could be better prepared for the attack because of it, you know, but her warnings never seem to do any good. Rand, I feel like, grasps that at a fairly deep level, though, when he's using her later on.
Yeah.
That he never really seems to demand when or how can I change it. You know, whereas Suan, for example, totally misses the point. She sees the foretelling and is like, oh, how can I change what's going to happen?
Probably.
Whereas Rand looks at it and says, oh, okay, assuming this is going to happen, what do I need to do to prep?
And Perrin thinks along a similar line. He has the thought, if she's going to die by violence, it could mean an attack on the camp. But there were scouts out every day and guards set day and night. And Moraine had the camp warded, so she said, so no creature of the dark would see it unless he walked right into it. He thought of the wolves. No, he thinks. The scouts would find anyone or anything trying to approach the camp.
The words don't do you a lot of good when you set off a fountain of power that anyone can see for 15 miles.
Right. Well, they won't be able to see it, but they can feel it.
Yeah. And we get a little more about Min's viewings.
She had told Perrin she had tried warning people about bad things when, at 6 or 7, she had first realized not everyone could see what she saw. She would not say more, but he had the impression that her warnings only made matters worse when they were believed at all. She asks her when, and she explains it doesn't work that way. She doesn't know when. She just knows that something will happen.
It brings up some interesting thoughts about free will in Randland.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Like, there's so much prophecy and so many things that we know are going to happen.
And with the Ta'veren thing,
mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder how much is their free will and how much they have to do.
But free will is always an interesting discussion as to whether or not we have it or whether we simply react to what's going on around us and whether we ever have a choice in the way we react. She says, Aes Sedai always have images around them, warders too, and a few others always do too. And I assume she's meaning Ta'veren. Basically, Matt Perrin and Rand.
She gave Perrin a searching look, half squinting, when she says it. Don't tell me what you see when you look at me, he said harshly, then shrugged his heavy shoulders.
Shrugged his shoulders.
I'm sorry, Min. I shouldn't have snapped at you. I didn't mean to hurt you. She gave him a surprised look. You didn't hurt me.
Perrin is very, very cautious about hurting other people. He has put a lot of restraints and a lot of barriers in his own way because he is so afraid of hurting somebody else. It's a big part of what he needs to overcome to become powerful. And it's why he has so much trouble being powerful in the world of dreams.
And real confidence, which he doesn't really have at this point.
And just belief that he can let himself go.
And not have to tightly control everything he does all the time.
There's a great scene in the World of Dreams where I think Egwene finds him. He's pressed up against a column and wrapped up in chains, and he's holding them tight as hard as he can. And he's like basically chained himself to the column, and the only thing holding him there is his own arms, like holding the chains tight.
Oh, one of the visions, one of her dreams.
It's not a vision because it's actually him in the World of Dreams holding himself in chains. Real important symbolism in what he's doing to himself is he's preventing himself from experiencing the full range of either the wolves and the visions and Teleron Riyadh, which is his inheritance. And we see that in the beginning of this when he's like trying not to use the advanced senses, trying not to smell things, trying not to like hunt the foxes and get into the mind of the wolf. He's very, very terrified of that.
It's also where we find out that the Aes Sedai don't know anything about Min's gift. They've never heard of it before. Which I guess is only interesting because the Shan-Chan do seem to know about it.
You know, I think it has a lot to do with the rigidity of the Shan-Chan social structure that it's very hard to hide a skill like that in Shan-Chan society, and so they would recognize it and bring it forth. Whereas, like in Ranland, there may have been a bunch of other people with the skill, but they just stayed in their villages and never were discovered.
Never found. I kind of suspected that too. It can't be, or it's probably less rare than they think.
We get a little more commentary from Min about how much Perrin cares about the Tuatha'an. Again, just reinforcing Perrin's desire to care. He cares about peace and wants to be peaceful.
But that's just not what he's meant for.
He's just not in the world he lives in. And that brings out our favorite Ogier, Loyal.
Tuatha'an? Came a rumbling voice, like a huge bumblebee. What about the Tuatha'an? The Ogier came to join them at the fire, marking his place in his book with a finger, the size of a large sausage. And we get a bit more rehash. These couple of chapters where there was a bunch of that, more rehash on like Ta'veren.
Like in any good third book in a series, chapter 1 and 2, they're going to recap a little bit. They're going to introduce you to some characters and some concepts that maybe you haven't read for a year.
Yeah.
And especially with this podcast, we've gone over these so many times that it's hard to like talk about them for another like 20th time, because like
I don't know how much to get into it. Yeah.
It's a little bit of an intro, a little bit of a, hey, here's what Ogier are. Here's what here's who Min is. Here's who the Tuatha'an are. Here's Perrin's central struggle.
Yeah.
So, it's good to have that stuff in the beginning.
Min talks about being yanked away from her life in Berlan,
which we know is Rand's Ta'veren yanking.
Yeah.
And Moraine.
My life has not been my own since I met Moraine and these Two Rivers farm boys. Ta'veren, Loyal began. Perrin waved at him to stop, but the Ogier could seldom be slowed, much less stopped, when one of his enthusiasms had him in its grip. All of us, all our lives, affect the lives of others, Min, as the wheel of time weaves us into the pattern. The life thread of each of us pulls and tugs at the life threads around us. Ta'veren are the same, only much, much more so. They tug at the entire pattern, for a time at least, forcing it to shape around them. The closer you are to them, the more you are affected personally. It's said that if you were in the same room with Artur Hawkwing, you could feel the pattern rearranging itself. I don't know how true that is, but I've read that it was. But it doesn't only work one way. Ta'veren themselves are woven to a tighter line than the rest of us, with fewer choices. Perrin grimaced. Bloody few of the ones that matter, he thinks, but does not say.
They really do have very few choices.
Yeah.
It's one of the central themes, I think, is that one of Rand's few choices he gets to make, possibly his only choice, is up on the In Veins of Gold.
Yeah.
When he decides whether or not to save the world or destroy it. And I often wonder if that's sort of the central choice of the books. A lot of fantasy, it's a bit of a fantasy trope to have all of existence or all of the battle depend on one person's central choice, whether they choose for good or evil. Even like Star Wars has that.
Yeah.
With Luke and his choice to, join me and
Ta'veren tugging on one side and Aes Sedai meddling on the other. What chance does a woman have? Min says. Loyal shrugged. Very little, I suppose, as long as she stays close to Ta'veren. As if I had a choice, Min growled. It was your good fortune, or misfortune, if you see it that way, to fall in with not one, but 3 Ta'veren, Rand, Mat, and Perrin. I myself counted a very good fortune, and would, even if they weren't my friends. I think I might even... The Ogier looked at them, suddenly shy, his ears twitching. Promise you will not laugh? I think I might write a book about it. I've been taking notes.
This is where I see Robert Jordan projecting himself onto Loyal here.
Yeah, I know you like that. I like that idea, too, that he's kind of is loyal.
I don't know why, but I can just see Robert Jordan hanging out with his buddies during the war being like, listen, I think I'm going to write a book about this. I've been taking notes. Like, I'm not going to make it exact. I'm going to like do parallels and make it a fantasy series. But listen, and he's kind of shy about it, just like Loyal.
That's wonderful, Min tells him. But some of us feel as if we're being danced about like puppets by these Ta'veren. And you are.
Well, the Ta'veren are being danced around like puppets by the pattern. So
true.
It's the pattern needs you, man. Deal with it.
Is that what happened to you, Loyal? Is that why you travel with Moraine? I know you Ogier almost never leave your steading. Did one of these Ta'veren tug you along with him? Loyal became engrossed in a study of his pipe. I just wanted to see the groves the Ogier planted, he muttered. Just to see the groves. He glanced at Perrin as if asking for help, but Perrin only grinned.
Keep telling yourself that, Loyal. I just wanted to see the groves. Nah, you wanted some adventure. Next thing I have is Rand coming out of the hut.
Rand was coming out of Moraine's hut. The Shinarans bowed as one, heads held up but hands to knees. Lord Dragon, Uno called, we stand ready, honor to serve. Uno, who could hardly say a sentence without a curse, spoke now with the deepest respect. The others echoed him. Honor to serve. Massima, who saw ill in everything, and whose eyes now shone with utter devotion.
I'm going to say the beginning of Massima's transition into the prophet. I mean, we see it a little bit at the end of the last book, but we see it even more here, where he's just like in total worship mode whenever Rand's around.
Eyes now shone with utter devotion. Yeah.
He like hates everybody, and then Rand shows up, and he's like, oh.
From the slope, Rand stared down at them a moment, then turned and disappeared into the trees. He's been arguing with Moraine again, Min said quietly, all day this time.
At this point, Rand has spent all winter basically practicing the sword with Lan and arguing with Moraine.
Yeah, I imagine that's pretty much what he has been doing the last 3 months.
Just a bit of a level up, I think, in the sword play here.
I think so.
That I think, as much as he was good at the sword and was a blade master barely at the end of and killed Turok, I think now he is definitely a solidly good blade master. But yeah, unfortunately he didn't really, he's desperately trying to train in the power, but with no one to tell him what to do. He's just been reaching out and grabbing at it.
He does seem better able to do that now.
To grab the power?
Yeah.
Certainly. I think he also has a fairly larger amount of ability to channel. He seems to be pulling in more power than we've seen in the past.
That makes sense. Rand walks off. I better go to him, Perrin says. After they argue, he always needs someone to talk to. And aside from Moraine and Lan, there were only the three of them, Min, Loyal, and him, who did not stare at Rand as if he stood above kings. And of the three, only Perrin knew him from before. Perrin notes that Rand's hut is far away from everyone because he hates being hero-worshipped.
Yeah. He was among them, but he was like disruptive because he was just walking around. And it's just not that big of a camp. It's less than 100 people altogether, I'd say.
That sounds right.
I'd guess maybe even closer to 50.
Rand walks through a crack in the stone. 1/2 a mile the crack ran, abruptly opening into a narrow vale, less than a mile long, its floor covered with rocks and boulders.
Sort of a hollow within a hollow?
Yeah. Perrin thinks nobody goes there. There's no water or anything. There's no real reason to go there.
I think I was thinking of like Rand's Fortress of Solitude.
I like that. Rand stood not far from the entrance, leaning against the rough trunk of a leather leaf, staring at the palms of his hands. Perrin knew that on each there was a heron, branded into his flesh. Rand did not move when Perrin's boot scraped on stone. Suddenly Rand began to recite softly, never looking up from his hands. Though twice and twice shall he be marked, twice to live and twice to die. Once the heron to set his path, twice the heron to name him true. Once the dragon for remembrance lost, twice the dragon for the price he must pay. With a shudder, he tucked his hand under his arms. But no dragons yet, he chuckled roughly. Not yet.
Not till book 4. But yeah, we know of course, he's got the 2 herons on his hand, and once the dragon for remembrance lost is the clan chief being marked to remember what he sees when he goes through the red column Terangrial.
Right.
And then twice the dragon for the price he must pay.
Because he's the dragon. Blood on the rocks and all that.
I always thought the second, blood on the rocks. But I think I've said this before, but I always thought the second dragon and the price he must pay is his hand. Because that dragon is on that hand that gets burned off, the second dragon.
Wait, what was that?
He loses the hand to Semirog.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that is part of the price he has to pay. And that hand is marked with the dragon because he's going to lose it.
I always thought it was meant more than that. Yeah, Discord is saying you could go crazy just from the pressure of having to save the world and being a 20-year-old boy.
Totally. I mean, yeah, the price pretty much could be his death, but he doesn't really die. So I always was wondering if maybe the price he pays is the loss of the hand and the pain.
Yeah, he doesn't have to die. Yeah, there is a ton of pain. It's a price. He doesn't get a life, really. It's more like a function. Perrin talks about how lately he wished he could just be a blacksmith again, and asks Rand if he would like to go back To herding sheep, death is lighter than a feather, duty heavier than a mountain. That's what they say in Shinar, Rand responds. The Dark One is stirring and the last battle is coming. And the Dragon Reborn has to face the Dark One in the last battle, or the shadow will cover everything. The wheel of time broken, every age remade in the Dark One's image, and there's only me. He began to laugh mirthlessly, his shoulders shaking. I have the duty, because there isn't anybody else, now is there? This is where I kind of thought, like, is this madness already? Perrin shifted uneasily. The laughter had a raw edge that made his skin crawl.
It's hard to know if it's just overwhelming pressure or the beginning of madness or some
Both
combination, combined with the fact that he's like trying to learn to channel and not succeeding very well. There's a lot going on already in Rand's head, and it's hard to know exactly what subtle effects are causing him to have this reaction.
The Chosen in Discord seem to think that this was just the pressure.
Yeah, I think that ragged laugh is probably mostly pressure.
I understand you were arguing with Moraine again. The same thing? Rand drew a deep, ragged breath. Don't we always argue about the same thing? They're down there, on Almouth Plain, and the light alone knows where else. Hundreds of them, thousands. They declared for the Dragon Reborn because I raised that banner, because I let myself be called the Dragon, because I could see no other choice. And they're dying, fighting, searching, and praying for the man who is supposed to lead them. Dying. And I sit here safe in the mountains all winter. I owe them something.
So he's in a bind because the second he lets people know where he is, it's going to be a race, because there's going to be groups of people who are going to flock to his banner combined with groups of people who are going to flock to try and kill him.
Right.
And so he is stuck in this bind where it's like, until he gets a force that's big enough to protect itself, he cannot announce himself and let people know where he is.
He can't start leading an army or he'll be attacked.
Exactly. And any group that he unites with will be slaughtered.
Moraine says I'll know what to do next because the pattern will force me to it, Rand says.
And he is, I think he starts dreaming of the sword.
Dreaming of the sword?
I think that's what pushes him to go for Kalendor. Sorry, when
dreaming
I say
of
sword,
Kalendor.
Yeah, dreaming of Kalendor. I often wonder if maybe those memories were implanted there by the Forsaken.
It could be. Do we have any reason to believe that? The trap?
Okay, so Perrin ends up seeing a confrontation between 4 of the Forsaken. Lanfear, Bilal, Ishmael, and I want to say Samuel?
I think that's right.
And there's an argument going on right before the camp is attacked. I think that Bilal wants to set a trap and lure Rand into using Kalendor so he can take it from him. And I think that Ishmael just wants to attack the camp.
Yeah, I can nod to that.
And so there's this argument going on between the Forsaken about, what they want to do. And we also see a lot of weird dream stuff going on in Tyr when we get there, with all the people in Tyr having the dream of Kalendor.
Yeah, he does start dreaming about Kalendor.
So I'm wondering if maybe there's something going on with the Forsaken and Rand where they're actually luring him to the Stone of Tyr. Because we know Bilal, who is very clever and very cunning and a net weaver, wants Kalendor. And I think he's trying to lure Rand there so he can get it out of the traps that it's placed in and take it from him. And we know this is before Rand really knows how to ward his dreams. So
that's true.
And the next thing I have is Rand sort of involuntarily channeling.
Yeah. He's just kind of talking about, light help me. Half the time I want it to happen now. He's talking about the last battle, to be over and done with. And the other half, how many times can I manage to, light, it pulls at me so. What if I can't? What if the ground trembled. Rand? Perrin said worriedly. Rand shivered. Despite the chill, there was sweat on his face. His eyes were shut tight. Oh, light, he groaned. It pulls so. Suddenly, the ground heaved beneath Perrin, and the valley echoed with a vast rumble. It seemed as if the ground was jerked out from under his feet. He fell, or the earth leapt up to meet him. The valley shook as though a vast hand reached down from the sky to wrench it out of the land. He clung to the ground while it tried to bounce him like a ball. Pebbles in front of his eyes leaped and tumbled, and dust rose in waves. Rand stood with his head thrown back, his eyes still shut tight. He did not seem to feel the thrashing of the ground that had him now at one angle, now at another. His balance never shifted, no matter how much he was tossed. Perrin could not be certain, being shaken as he was, but he thought Rand wore a sad smile. I liked that.
Just curious what the meaning of the sad smile was.
He doesn't want to channel. He knows it'll make him go crazy, but it feels great. That's kind of what I thought.
He's desperate and thinking of the power and thinking about drawing it in. And as soon as he starts to draw it in, it just flows into him uncontrollably. Yeah. And he has to send it away, even though it feels good.
Rand, for the love of the light, Rand, stop it. As abruptly as it had begun, it was done.
And we even say just like that much power is like a beacon. I think it's a beacon to the Myrddraal that was following the Raven, that was following the Tinkerwoman.
Sure. So if there's a Myrddraal anywhere nearby, within
10 to 15 miles is the range that Moraine gives.
Yeah. They're like better than channelers at sensing channeling.
Well, when it's that much power, yeah.
Well, yeah.
I think they actually have similar. Well, and we've speculated the fact that Myrddraal occur at the same rate in Trolloc populations as channelers occur in human populations.
Right.
And so it makes sense that Myrddraal have the same ability to sense channeling because their souls would essentially be channelers.
Yeah, if they hadn't been.
And they would have sort of a similar range and distance in terms of sensing.
I did not mean to do this. It was as if I tried to open a tap and instead pulled the whole tap out of the barrel. It filled me. I had to send it somewhere before it burned me up, but I did not mean this. Perrin shook his head. What use to tell him to try not to do it again? He barely knows more about what he's doing than I do.
Needs a teacher right away, because nobody knows what's going on.
Yeah. Perrin says, we had best get on back to the camp. It will be dark soon. And I don't know about you, but I'm hungry. What? Oh, you go on, Perrin. I will be along. I want to be alone again for a while. Perrin hesitated, then turned reluctantly toward the crack in the valley wall. He stopped when Rand spoke again. Do you have dreams when you sleep? Good dreams? Sometimes, Perrin said warily. I don't remember much of what I dream. He had learned to set guards on his dreaming. They're always there, dreams, Rand said so softly Perrin barely heard. Maybe they tell us things, true things. He fell silent, brooding. It's interesting that he mentions dreams there, Rand. We were just talking about how the dreams end up pulling him toward the Stone of Tyr.
And also how Perrin had learned to set guards on his dreaming, the way he's chained himself up, so he's not reaching out to the wolves.
Yeah.
I believe that Rand is a natural dreamer.
I think so, too. He just never gets any training.
Exactly. And once he wards his dreams, he no longer sort of has that natural ability to wander into the dream world. But until then, he's projecting all over the place, and he ends up in Tel'aran'rhiod a whole bunch during this book.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes me wonder often in The Eye of the World and The Great Hunt, there's some parts where it just makes me wonder, like, how much is what Ishmael's doing, how much is what Rand is doing, like, what's the play there? Because I'm sure it's some of both, but it's really hard to tell what exactly is happening, you know?
I think Ishmael's so well trained, and he's pulling Rand into the dream that he has more control than he normally would in just general Tel'aran'rhiod.
Yeah.
I always thought in The Eye of the World he's pulling Rand into his dream shard.
I think so. I can't think of a specific example, but sometimes it seems like Rand has a little bit more control than Ishmael expects in some of those scenes when he's able to pull himself out.
He's like able to resist,
yeah,
more so than Ishmael would expect, and I would assume that's
probably
tied
a better way to put it
to Rand's dreaming ability.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, I'm kind of excited to talk about all the encounters that the various characters have with Rand in Tel'aran'rhiod during this book, because it happens all the time. Perrin encounters him, and Rand gives him a little burn on his chest. Egwene encounters him. A bunch of the Forsaken run into him. Just good scenes.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?